You should have left him to die." The words cut through the small cabin like shards of ice, and Nessa felt her entire body go rigid. She stood between the massive Alpha King and the small golden-eyed cub who had pressed himself against her legs, trembling but refusing to hide. 3 months. She had spent 3 months nursing this wounded creature back to health, singing to him when nightmares made him whimper, feeding him by hand when he was too weak to hunt. And now this stranger, this terrifying embodiment of raw power, stood in her doorway, telling her she should have abandoned him. "Excuse me?" The word came out smaller than she intended, but Nessa refused to look away from eyes that burned like molten amber. Alpha King Demon Blackthorn took a step forward, and the very air seemed to thicken with his presence. He was everything the rumors claimed, and worse. Tall enough that he had to duck slightly under her doorframe, with shoulders broad enough to block out the fading. Sunlight, and a face carved from the same unforgiving stone as the mountains that ringed his kingdom. But it was his scent that made her wolf stir for the first time in her 24 years of existence. Pine and smoke, and something ancient that called to a part of her she did not even know existed. If you had left him in those traps, my enemies would not have known he survived. They would not have spent these months searching, killing innocent wolves in every territory, burning villages to find any trace of him. Your mercy, Omega, has cost me hundreds of lives. The cub, the small creature she had named Lucky before she knew his true identity, made a sound that was half growl, half whimper. His tiny body shook with the effort of trying to shift into his human form, something he had not been able to do since the trauma of his kidnapping. Nessa felt her hands curl into fists at her sides, felt something hot and unfamiliar rise in her chest. Anger. She had been called worthless her entire life. Defective. Ashamed to her bloodline. But she had never been called cruel. Then perhaps you should have protected him better in the first place, Your Majesty. The silence that followed was deafening. The 3 elite warriors who had accompanied the Alpha King into her clearing went absolutely still, their faces showing identical expressions of shock. No one spoke to Demon Blackthorn that way. No one challenged the most powerful Alpha in 5 centuries, especially not a wolfless. Omega, who lived alone in a cabin at the edge of nowhere, surviving on foraged herbs and the small garden she tended with hands that never stopped shaking when strangers came near. But Nessa had spent 3 months watching this child cry in his sleep, had held him through fevers that should have killed him, had sung every lullaby she knew to chase away the demons that haunted his golden eyes. She would not apologize for saving him. She would not pretend that leaving a helpless creature to die was somehow the noble choice. Demon moved so fast she did not have time to flinch. One moment he was standing in the doorway, the next he was inches from her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes that seemed to swirl and shift like living fire. His hand came up, and she braced herself for the blow she had learned to expect from those stronger than her. But his fingers only brushed against her cheek, so gently it made her breath catch in her throat. "Your wolf," he said, and his voice had dropped to something lower, rougher, almost reverent. "Where is your wolf?" It was the question she had heard 1,000 times, always delivered with disgust or pity or cruel amusement. The question that defined her existence in a world where your wolf was your worth, your identity, your very soul, made manifest. Nessa tried to step back, but the cub behind her and the wall at her back left her nowhere to go. "I do not have one. I am defective. Everyone knows this." She forced the words out, even though they tasted like ash on her tongue. "Your pack told you this?" Demon asked, and something dangerous flickered across his expression. "Yes." She met his gaze because she had learned long ago that looking away only made the cruelty last longer. "The healers examined me when I came of age. No wolf, no shift, no future. They were very thorough in their explanations of my worthlessness. They were wrong." The words were simple, absolute, spoken with the kind of certainty that moved mountains and toppled kingdoms. Before Nessa could process them, Demon's hand moved from her cheek to the base of her throat, his fingers pressing against the pulse point there, with a gentleness that contradicted every story she had ever heard about him. "You have a wolf, Omega. I can feel her. Dormant, suppressed, buried under layers of trauma and lies. But there, and unless I am very much mistaken, she carries a bloodline that was supposed to be extinct. The cub, Lucky, Prince Kieran, whatever she was supposed to call him now, suddenly shifted. The transformation was messy, painful to watch, his small body contorting in ways that made Nessa want to gather him close and protect him from his own biology. But when it was done, a small boy with golden eyes and tangled dark hair stood on shaking legs, one hand still gripping the fabric of her worn dress. "Mama stayed," he said, and his voice was hoarse from disuse, the words barely more than a whisper. "When the bad wolves came and put me in the metal teeth, when I called and no one came, Mama found me. Mama stayed." Nessa felt her heart crack open in her chest. She had known, on some level, that he had imprinted on her, that his traumatized young mind had latched onto the first source of safety and comfort he had found after his ordeal. But hearing him call her Mama, seeing the absolute trust in those ancient eyes, destroyed something inside her and rebuilt it into a shape she did not recognize. Kieran. Demon's voice gentled in a way that transformed his entire face, made him look younger, almost vulnerable. "She saved you. I know. But she is not your mother. Your mother died bringing you into this world, and she was a queen, a warrior, the bravest wolf I have ever known." The little boy's face crumpled, and Nessa moved without thinking, dropping to her knees and pulling him against her chest, her hand cradling the back of his head, the way she had done 100 times when nightmares woke him screaming. "Your father is right, Lucky. I am not your mother. I am just someone who found you and could not leave you behind." She felt tears burning in her eyes but refused to let them fall. "But you will always be safe with me, I promise. Even if that means letting you go now." Kieran's small hands fisted in her dress, and he buried his face against her shoulder, his whole body shaking with sobs that he tried desperately to suppress. Nessa looked up at Demon, expecting to see impatience or anger or dismissal. Instead, she saw something that looked almost like pain. "He has not shifted or spoken since the kidnapping," Demon said quietly. "My healers tried everything. Spells, potions, the finest trauma specialist in the kingdom. Nothing worked. He stayed trapped in his wolf form, refusing to shift, refusing to make a sound except to howl at night. 3 months of searching, of finding nothing but false leads and bodies of wolves who died trying to protect information about his whereabouts. I thought I had lost him forever." "The traps were silver-laced," Nessa said, forcing herself to focus on facts rather than the way her heart was pounding at the Alpha King's proximity. "His legs were badly infected when I found him. I had to cut the metal out piece by piece and pack the wounds with herbs to draw out the poison. It took weeks before he could walk properly again." She felt Kieran's grip tighten on her dress. "There were nightmares. Every night. He would wake up howling, and I would hold him until he calmed down. I did not know he was a prince. I did not know he was anyone's son. I just knew he was suffering, and I could not bear it." Demon crouched down, bringing himself to eye level with her, and the movement made Nessa's breath catch. This close, she could see the exhaustion etched into every line of his face, the shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and desperate searching. "What is your name, Omega?" He asked it like it mattered, like she was something more than a mistake of nature that his pack had grudgingly allowed to survive on their territory's edge. Nessa Thornwood, though the Thornwood pack has made it very clear I am not truly one of them." She heard the bitterness in her own voice, and hated it. "Well, Nessa Thornwood." Demon's hand moved to cover hers where it rested on Kieran's back, and the contact sent a jolt of electricity up her arm that made her gasp. "You are coming with me to the royal court. You and my son both." It was not a request. Nessa had spent enough time around dominant wolves to recognize a command when she heard one. But something in her, that stubborn core that had kept her alive through years of neglect and casual cruelty, rebelled against the assumption that she would simply obey. "No." The word came out stronger than she expected, and she saw surprise flicker across Demon's face. "I saved your son because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted a reward or recognition. I have a life here. It is small and quiet and mine, and I will not abandon it just because you tell me to." One of the warriors behind Demon made a sound that might have been a laugh hastily converted into a cough. Demon's eyes narrowed slightly, and Nessa braced herself for the anger she had learned was inevitable when you defied someone with power. But instead of rage, she saw something that looked almost like respect. "You have courage. Foolish courage, perhaps, but courage nonetheless." He stood, pulling her up with him with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his massive frame. Kieran clung to her, his small body fitting against her side like he had been made to be there. "But this is not about reward, Nessa. This is about survival. Yours, mine, and my son's. The wolves who took Kieran are still out there. They will not stop trying until they succeed in killing him and destroying my bloodline. And if they discover that he has been here with you, they will come for you too." The threat was delivered calmly, matter-of-factly, but Nessa felt ice spread through her veins nonetheless. She had not thought about that, had not considered that her act of mercy might have painted a target on her back. "Why would they care about me? I am nothing. No pack would go to war over a wolfless Omega." Demon's expression shifted into something complicated, something that made her feel like she was standing on the edge of a cliff she had not known was there. "You are not wolfless. I told you that already, and you are not nothing." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with a reverence that made her chest ache. "You carry the scent of Luna bloodline, faint, buried, but unmistakable to those who know what to look for. The same bloodline that my enemies tried to eradicate 20 years ago because of a prophecy." Nessa's mind reeled. Luna bloodline. The ancient wolves who could command pack bonds, who could strengthen their alpha's power, who were born to lead alongside the most dominant wolves in existence. They existed only in stories now, in legends told to young wolves about the glory days before the Great Purge. That is impossible. My mother was an Omega. My father was barely a Beta. There is no royal blood in my line. Your mother lied to protect you, Demon said, and there was certainty in his voice that brooked no argument. Or perhaps she did not know the truth herself. Luna bloodline can skip generations, can hide in wolves who never shift, waiting for the right catalyst to awaken it. His hand slid from her face to her throat again, and this time his fingers pressed more firmly against her pulse point. "I can feel your wolf, Nessa. She recognizes me. She knows what we are to each other." The word hung unspoken between them, but Nessa heard it anyway. Mates. He was claiming they were mates. The idea was so absurd, so impossible that she wanted to laugh. Alpha Kings did not mate with defective Omegas. They chose strong wolves, beautiful wolves, wolves who could stand at their side and strengthen their bloodline. They did not choose women who lived in tiny cabins at the edge of civilization, who had been rejected by their own pack, who could not even shift into the form that defined their very existence. "You are wrong," she whispered. But even as she said it, she felt something stir deep inside her chest. A presence she had never felt before, ancient and patient and utterly certain. "Am I?" Demon leaned closer, and his breath ghosted across her lips, warm and intoxicating. Then explain why my wolf is going absolutely wild right now, demanding I claim you, protect you, mark you as mine. Explain why I consent our bond even though you cannot feel it yet. Explain why my son, who has not trusted anyone in 3 months, clings to you like you are the only solid thing in his world. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. Nessa could not explain any of it, could not make sense of the way her body responded to Demon's nearness, the way her heart raced and her skin felt too tight, and her breath came in short gasps that had nothing to do with fear. She had never felt attraction before, had assumed she was as broken in that regard as she was in every other way. But this overwhelming pull toward a man she had just met, this desperate need to lean into his touch and let him carry the weight she had been bearing alone for so long, this terrified her more than any threat of outside enemies. "I need time," she said, and her voice came out shaky, uncertain. "This is too much. You show up at my home, tell me everything I know about myself is wrong, claim we are mates, and expect me to just uproot my entire life without question. I need time to think." Demon studied her for a long moment, and Nessa had the uncomfortable feeling he could see straight through to her soul, could read every fear and desperate hope she tried to hide. Finally, he nodded. 3 days. I will give you 3 days to put your affairs in order, to say your goodbyes, to come to terms with what is happening. My warriors and I will camp in your clearing to ensure your safety. But after 3 days, you are coming to the royal court, Nessa, willingly or not. Because whether you accept it yet or not, you are my mate. My son has claimed you as his mother, and my enemies will kill you the moment they discover you exist. He stepped back, and the loss of his presence felt like a physical blow. Kieran whimpered, his small hand still clutching at Nessa's dress like a lifeline. "Can I stay with Mama tonight?" The little boy's voice was so small, so hopeful, that Nessa felt her resolve crumble like sand. She looked at Demon, expecting him to refuse, to insist that his son return to the royal tents with him. Instead, she saw conflict wore across his features before he finally nodded. "Tonight only. Tomorrow we begin preparing you for the journey." He looked at Nessa, and his eyes burned with intensity that made her knees weak. "And tomorrow we also begin awakening your wolf. Because ready or not, Nessa Thornwood, your quiet life is over. The moment you pulled my son from those traps, you stepped into a destiny that will either save this kingdom or destroy it." He turned and walked out of her cabin, his warriors following like shadows, and Nessa was left standing in the sudden silence, with a small prince pressed against her side, and a future that terrified her more than any past she had survived. That night, after she had fed Kieran the venison stew she had made, and tucked him into the small bed she had built for him, Nessa stood at her window and watched the fires burning in her clearing. 4 massive tents had been erected, and she could see the shapes of wolves patrolling the perimeter, their eyes reflecting the moonlight in shades of amber and gold. She pressed her hand against her chest, against the strange warmth that had settled there since Demon's touch, and tried to understand what was happening to her. For 24 years, she had been nothing. No wolf, no pack, no purpose beyond basic survival. She had made peace with that loneliness, had built a life that asked nothing of her, except that she keep breathing. And now this stranger, this impossibly powerful Alpha King, was telling her that everything she knew was a lie, that she had a wolf sleeping inside her, that she carried a bloodline people had killed to eradicate, that she was his mate, destined to stand at his side and help rule a kingdom she had only ever heard about in stories. It was too much, too impossible, too frightening to even consider. But as she stood there in the darkness, watching the fires burn and feeling the phantom warmth of Demon's touch on her skin, Nessa could not deny the truth that was slowly, inexorably settling into her bones. Her life had changed the moment she found Kieran in those traps. There was no going back. Only forward into a future she could not begin to imagine. She just had to find the courage to take the first step. The next morning arrived with the kind of golden light that made everything seem possible, and Nessa woke to find Kieran already awake, sitting at her small table and watching her with those unsettling golden eyes that seemed far too old for his. Young face. "Mama is scared," he said, and it was a statement rather than a question. Nessa sat up slowly, pushing her hair back from her face and trying to find words that would not be a lie. "Yes, I am very scared, Lucky." She had not stopped using the nickname, and from the small smile that crossed his face, she knew he did not mind. "Everything is changing so fast, and I do not know how to be what your father says I am." Kieran climbed down from his chair and crossed to her bed, his small hand reaching out to touch her arm with a gentleness that made her chest ache. "Mama does not have to be anything except Mama. That is enough." The simple faith in his voice, the absolute certainty that she was exactly what he needed, broke something loose inside Nessa that she had been trying desperately to hold together. She pulled him into her arms and let herself cry, let out all the fear and confusion and overwhelming terror that had been building since Demon had walked through her door. Kieran held her the way she had held him through countless nightmares, his small hand patting her back, his voice humming a tuneless melody that somehow soothed the ragged edges of her panic. When the tears finally stopped, Nessa felt hollow but strangely lighter. She cleaned her face with water from the basin, dressed in her most practical clothing, and stepped outside to face whatever the day would bring. Demon was waiting for her, standing at the edge of her garden with his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. In the morning light, he looked even more intimidating than he had the night before, all sharp edges and barely controlled power. But when his eyes met hers, she saw something soften in them, something almost gentle. "Did you sleep?" he asked, and the question was so ordinary, so unexpectedly considerate, that Nessa found herself answering honestly. "Not much. Too many thoughts." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how shabby her dress looked, compared to his fine leather and silver adornments. "I have been thinking about what you said. About my wolf. About the Luna bloodline. About all of it. And I have questions." Demon nodded, moving closer but stopping a respectful distance away, as if he knew his proximity affected her and was trying to give her space to think clearly. "Ask. I will answer what I can." Nessa took a breath, steadying herself. "If I truly have this bloodline, why did it never manifest? Why did no one in my pack sense it? Why did I spend my entire life being treated as defective if I was supposedly carrying this powerful legacy?" The questions tumbled out faster than she could organize them, and she saw Demon's expression shift into something complicated. "Luna bloodline manifests differently than normal wolf traits," he said, his voice taking on the tone of someone reciting old lessons. "It does not always present at first shift. Sometimes it waits for a catalyst, a moment of extreme emotional duress, or a bond with a powerful alpha. In the old days, young Lunas were trained to recognize the signs, to nurture the awakening. But after the Great Purge, that knowledge was lost. Most wolves do not even know what to look for anymore." He moved closer, and this time Nessa did not step back. "As for your pack, they sensed something in you. They must have. But instead of investigating, instead of considering the possibility that you were more than you appeared, they took the easy path. They labeled you defective and pushed you to the margins where you would not challenge their comfortable understanding of the world." The bitterness in his voice surprised her. "I have seen it before. Wolves who are different, who do not fit the expected patterns, are often discarded rather than nurtured. It is one of our species' greatest failings." Nessa absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. "And the prophecy you mentioned, what does it say?" Demon hesitated, and in that pause, Nessa saw genuine, concern flicker across his features. The prophecy is old, written in the time before the Great Purge. It speaks of a Luna born from nothing, who will rise to stand beside the Blackthorn King and unite the fractured packs under one true rule. Together, they will be unstoppable, their bond strong enough to weather any storm, their combined power enough to bring an age of peace that has not been seen in centuries. He met her eyes, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. But it also says that this union will be opposed by those who profit from division, that the Luna will face trials that test her very soul, and that the choice to accept her destiny must be freely made. If forced or coerced, the bond will corrupt and destroy rather than strengthen. Nessa felt her heart hammering in her chest. So, if I refuse, if I say I do not want this destiny, what happens? Demon's jaw tightened, and she saw pain flash across his expression before he masked it. Then I will honor your choice. I will ensure your safety, make sure my enemies cannot touch you, but I will not force you to be my mate. The prophecy is clear. This only works if you choose it willingly. The admission cost him something. Nessa could see it in the rigid set of his shoulders, in the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. He wanted her. His wolf wanted her. But he was offering her the freedom to walk away, even though it clearly went against every instinct he possessed. Why? She asked. The word barely more than a whisper. Why give me a choice at all? You are the Alpha King. You could simply take what you want. No one would stop you. Demon moved then, closing the distance between them in 2 long strides, and his hands came up to frame her face with a gentleness that made her eyes sting with unshed tears. Because you deserve better than to be claimed like a prize of war. Because my son calls you Mama, and trusts you in a way he trusts no one else, and forcing you against your will would destroy that trust. Because my mate, my true mate, should come to me freely or not at all. His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones, and his voice dropped to something rough and raw. Because I have seen what happens when alphas take without asking, when they use their power to compel rather than earn, and I swore long ago that I would never become that kind of monster, no matter how much it costs me. Nessa stared up at him, at this powerful Alpha King who held her like she was something precious, who offered her freedom, even though she could see how much he wanted to keep her, and felt something shift deep inside her chest. That strange presence, that patient ancient thing she had felt stirring since his touch, suddenly bloomed to life with an intensity that stole her breath. For the first time in her life, Nessa felt her wolf. Not fully, not in a way that would let her shift, but present nonetheless. A silver consciousness that twined around her own, fierce and protective and utterly certain of what it wanted. Mine, it whispered. And Nessa did not know if the thought was hers or her wolf's, or some combination of both. Mine to choose, mine to claim, mine to protect. She must have made some sound because Demon's eyes widened, his hands tightening on her face. Nessa, what is it? What is wrong? But nothing was wrong. For the first time in her entire existence, something felt right. Nessa reached up and covered Demon's hands with her own, feeling the calluses on his palms, the strength in his fingers, the faint tremor that betrayed how affected he was by their proximity. I can feel her, she whispered, wonder bleeding through every word. My wolf. She is there. Faint and far away, but there. You were telling the truth. Demon's expression transformed, and the smile that spread across his face was so genuine, so relieved, that it made him look years younger. Of course I was telling the truth. I would never lie to you about something so important. He pulled her closer, until her forehead rested against his chest, and she could hear the steady thunder of his heartbeat beneath her ear. This is just the beginning, Nessa. With training, with time, she will grow stronger. You will grow stronger. And when you finally shift, when you finally see yourself as you truly are, it will be magnificent. Nessa let herself lean into his embrace, let herself take comfort in his strength and warmth, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. For now, in this moment, she would let herself believe in the possibility of something more, the something she had stopped hoping for years ago. The sound of approaching footsteps made them both pull apart, and Nessa turned to see one of Demon's warriors emerging from the tree line. The woman was tall and lean, with short dark hair and eyes that assessed everything with predatory precision. "Your Majesty," she said, inclining her head in respect. "We have secured the perimeter, but there are signs that someone has been watching the cabin. Old tracks, at least a week old, but the scent signature matches known associates of Lady Seraphina's faction." Demon's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The gentleman who had been holding Nessa disappeared, replaced by the Alpha King whose reputation made seasoned warriors tremble. "How many?" His voice was hard, clipped, and utterly commanding. "At least 3, possibly more." They stayed at a distance, watching, rather than approaching. I would guess they were trying to confirm whether the rumors of the missing prince being seen in this territory had any substance. The warrior, whose name Nessa still did not know, shifted her gaze to Nessa with something that might have been sympathy. "They will know she has been in contact with Kieran now. Her scent is all over him, and his over her. When they report back to their mistress, Nessa Thornwood will become a target." Nessa felt ice spread through her veins. She had known, intellectually, that helping Kieran might have consequences. But hearing it stated so baldly, knowing that dangerous wolves were already aware of her existence and watching her home, made the threat feel suddenly, terrifyingly real. "What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below." Demon turned to her, and his eyes were blazing with barely controlled fury. Not at her, she realized, but at the situation, at the enemies who dared threaten what was his. "The 3 days I promised you are no longer safe to give. We leave within the hour. Pack whatever you cannot bear to leave behind, but understand that everything you need will be provided at the royal court." It was a command, delivered with absolute authority. But Nessa found she could not resent it. Not when she could see the genuine concern beneath his harsh tone. Not when she knew he was right about the danger. She nodded, her mind already cataloging the few possessions she actually cared about. Her mother's journal. The only thing she had left from the woman who had died bringing her into the world. The herbs and remedies she had spent years perfecting. The small carved wolf Kieran had clumsily made for her during his recovery, declaring it looked just like her, even though she had no wolf to look like. "I will be ready," she said, and was proud that her voice did not shake. Demon touched her cheek one more time, a gentle brush of his fingers that promised protection and something deeper. "I will keep you safe, Nessa. Both you and Kieran. I swear it on my life and my crown." Then he was gone, barking orders to his warriors, organizing their departure with the efficiency of someone who had commanded armies. Nessa watched him for a moment, this powerful alpha who had crashed into her quiet life and changed everything, before turning back to her cabin. Inside, Kieran was still sitting at her table, but his small face was tight with worry. "We are leaving?" he asked, and despite his young age, there was understanding in his eyes. Understanding that this place, this safe haven, could not protect them anymore. "Yes, Lucky, we are going to your home, to the palace where you belong." Nessa knelt down in front of him, taking his small hands in hers. "Are you frightened?" Kieran considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "A little. The palace has lots of people. Lots of wolves who will look at me and see the prince who was weak. Enough to get taken. Who could not even shift back to tell anyone what happened." His voice dropped to a whisper. "What if they think I am broken too?" Nessa felt her heart crack. She pulled him into her arms and held him tight. This small, brave boy who had survived so much. Then they will be wrong, just like everyone who said I was broken was wrong. You are not weak, Kieran. You survived something terrible. You stayed alive when others would have given up, and you trusted me enough to let me help you. That takes more strength than most wolves will ever have. She pulled back to look him in the eyes. And if anyone at that palace tries to make you feel less than you are, they will have to answer to me. Understand? Kieran's face brightened with the first genuine smile she had seen from him since Demon's arrival. Mama is fierce, he said, and there was pride in his young voice. Yes, Nessa agreed, surprising herself with the conviction in her tone. Yes, I suppose I am. She spent the next hour gathering her few possessions, tucking them into a worn leather bag that had belonged to her mother. The journal went in first, its pages filled with recipes and observations and tiny sketches of herbs. Then her most precious remedies, the ones that had taken years to perfect. The carved wolf from Kieran, a few pieces of clothing that were not completely threadbare. It was a pathetically small collection for an entire life, but Nessa found she did not mourn leaving the rest behind. This cabin had been a refuge, yes, but it had also been a prison of sorts, a place where she had hidden from a world that did not want her. Maybe it was time to step out of the shadows and see what she could become in the light. When she emerged from the cabin, Demon was waiting with 2 horses, both massive creatures that looked like they could carry a fully armored warrior without strain. He helped her mount with hands that lingered perhaps a moment longer than necessary on her waist, steadying her until she found her balance. Kieran shifted into his wolf form without being asked, a small golden bundle of fur that immediately positioned himself between the horses, close enough to both Demon and Nessa that he could keep them both in sight. The journey to the royal court took 3 days, and every moment of it was a revelation for Nessa. She had never traveled beyond her pack's immediate territory, had never seen the great forests and sweeping plains that made up the kingdom's heartland. Demon rode beside her, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the land with a passion that surprised her. He was not the cold, ruthless alpha king of reputation when he spoke about his kingdom. He was a man who loved his home, who understood the responsibility of protecting it, who carried the weight of thousands of lives on his shoulders and bore it without complaint. At night, they camped in clearings secured by Demon's warriors, and Nessa found herself drawn into conversations around the fire. The warriors treated her with a cautious respect that she did not quite understand, until the woman who had first brought news of the Watchers, whose name was Lyra, pulled her aside. "You are the first potential Luna we have seen the king acknowledge in 5 years," Lyra said bluntly. "Since Queen Miriam died. We thought he would never take another mate, that he would rule alone until Kieran came of age. But the way he looks at you, the way his wolf responds to your presence, it is unmistakable. You are his mate, whether the bond is complete or not." Nessa felt her cheeks heat. "I am just an Omega who helped his son. Nothing more." Lyra's laugh was sharp and not unkind. "If you truly believe that, you are the only one. The king is many things, Nessa Thornwood, but impulsive is not one of them. If he has claimed you as his mate, it is because his wolf has recognized something in you that cannot be denied. The bond may not be complete yet, but it is there. We can all sense it." She paused, her expression growing serious. "Which means you need to understand what you are walking into. The royal court is a nest of vipers. Wolves who smile to your face while plotting your downfall behind your back. And the most dangerous of them all is Lady Seraphina Nightshade. She is a powerful noble, beautiful, and cunning, and she has been positioning herself as the future queen since Miriam's death. She will see you as a threat to everything she has worked for, and she will not hesitate to destroy you if given the chance." The warning sent chills down Nessa's spine, but she forced herself to meet Lyra's gaze steadily. "Then, I will have to make sure she does not get that chance. Lyra's smile widened into something approving. Good. You have more spine than I expected from someone raised as an Omega. You are going to need it. That night, as Nessa lay in her tent listening to the sounds of the camp settling around her, she felt Demon's presence before she heard him. May I come in? His voice was low, respectful, waiting for her permission even though he was the Alpha King and could have entered without asking. Yes. Nessa sat up, pulling her blanket around her shoulders against the chill. Demon ducked through the tent flap, and the small space immediately felt even smaller with his massive frame filling it. He sat down across from her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, but far enough that she did not feel crowded. I wanted to check on you. This journey, this entire situation, it is a lot to process. His eyes searched her face in the dim light. How are you holding up? Nessa considered lying, giving him the easy answer that she was fine, that she could handle anything. But something about the genuine concern in his expression made her want to be honest. I am terrified, she admitted. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about my place in the world, it is all wrong. And now I am traveling to a palace full of wolves, who will see me as an interloper at best and a threat at worst. I do not know how to be what you need me to be. I do not even know how to be what I need me to be. Demon moved closer, his hand reaching out to cover hers where it clutched the blanket. You do not have to be anything except yourself, Nessa. That is what I keep trying to tell you. I am not asking you to transform into some perfect queen overnight. I am asking you to trust me, to let me help you. Awaken the wolf inside you, to give this bond between us a chance to grow. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, and the simple touch sent warmth spreading through her chest. I know you are scared. I would worry if you were not. But you are stronger than you know. You survived years of neglect and rejection. You saved my son when trained warriors failed. You stood up to me when I was being an insensitive fool. That strength, that courage, it is already inside you. You just need to learn to trust it. Nessa felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. What if I fail? What if I cannot awaken my wolf? What if this Luna bloodline you are so certain about does not actually exist in me? Demon's expression softened, and he shifted even closer, until there was barely any space left between them. Then we will face that together. But I do not believe you will fail, Nessa. I have seen the way your wolf stirs when I am near. I have felt the pull of our bond growing stronger. Every day. You are meant for this. Meant for me. And I will spend every day proving that to you, until you believe it too. The intensity in his voice, in his eyes, made Nessa's breath catch. She found herself leaning toward him, drawn by a force she could not name and did not want to resist. Demon, she whispered, his name feeling both foreign and right on her lips. I am not sure I know how to do this, how to let someone in, how to trust that this is real and not just some beautiful dream that will shatter the moment I truly believe in it. Then let me teach you, Demon said, and his hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with devastating tenderness. Let me show you that you are worthy of this, of me, of everything I want to give you. One day at a time, one moment at a time, until you see yourself the way I see you. Nessa closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, and let herself imagine it. A future where she was not broken or defective or worthless. A future where she stood beside this powerful Alpha King, not as his obligation, but as his equal. A future where she had a family, a purpose, a place to belong. It seemed impossible. But then, everything about the last few days had seemed impossible, and yet here she was. Okay, she breathed, opening her eyes to meet his golden gaze. Teach me. Show me. I cannot promise I will not be difficult or stubborn or terrified, but I will try. I will try to believe in this. In us. In possibility of something more. Demon's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face into something that took her breath away. That is all I ask, Nessa. Just try. The rest will come in time. He leaned forward, and for a heart-stopping moment, Nessa thought he might kiss her. But instead, he pressed his lips to her forehead in a gesture so gentle, so reverent, that it undid her completely. Sleep, little Luna. Tomorrow we reach the palace, and your real journey begins. Then he was gone, slipping out of her tent and leaving her alone with a racing heart and a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the blankets wrapped around her shoulders. Nessa lay back down, pressing her hand over her heart, and felt her wolf stir again. That silver presence that had been growing stronger with each passing day, more certain with each moment spent in Demon's presence. Mine, it whispered again. And this time Nessa did not argue. This time, she let herself believe. They reached the palace at sunset on the third day, and Nessa's first glimpse of it stole what little courage she had managed to gather. It was massive, sprawling across a hilltop, like a stone giant surveying its domain. Towers reached toward the sky, their peaks gilded in the dying light. Walls thick enough to withstand any siege surrounded gardens that looked like something from a storybook. And everywhere, wolves, hundreds of them, moving through the grounds with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Warriors training in the courtyard, servants hurrying between buildings, nobles strolling through the gardens with an air of casual superiority that made Nessa want to turn her horse around and flee back to her simple cabin. Breathe, Demon said, and his hand found hers, squeezing gently. I know it is overwhelming, but remember, you belong here. You are with me, and no one will dare harm you. Nessa wanted to believe him, but as they rode through the massive gates and into the palace grounds, she felt the weight of countless stares following her. Curious, assessing, hostile. She kept her chin up through sheer force of will, refusing to show the terror that was clawing at her insides. Kieran, still in his wolf form, pressed close to her horse, his golden eyes scanning the crowd with wariness that broke her heart. This should have been a joyous homecoming for him, but instead, he looked ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. They dismounted in the main courtyard, and immediately a wave of wolves descended on them. Servants reaching for bags, warriors forming a protective circle, advisors attempting to catch Demon's attention with urgent whispers. Nessa felt herself being swept along, separated from Demon by the press of bodies, and panic started to claw at her throat. Then a small hand slipped into hers, and she looked down to find Kieran had shifted to his human form and was gripping her fingers like a lifeline. Stay with me, Mama, he whispered, his young face pinched with anxiety. Do not let them take you away. Nessa squeezed his hand back, drawing strength from his trust in her. I am not going anywhere, Lucky. I promise. How touching. The voice cut through the chaos like a knife, smooth and cultured and dripping with disdain. Nessa looked up to find a woman standing at the top of the palace steps, and even from a distance her beauty was undeniable. Tall and elegant, with hair like spun gold and eyes the color of ice, she wore a gown that probably cost more than Nessa's entire cabin. Lady Seraphina Nightshade, Nessa realized with sinking certainty. The woman who wanted to be queen. Your Majesty, Seraphina said, descending the steps with the grace of someone who knew every eye was on her. We have been so worried about Prince Kieran. When news reached us that he had been found, safe and unharmed, there was much rejoicing. Her gaze slid to Nessa, and the assessment in those cold eyes made Nessa feel like an insect being examined. Under glass. And this must be the Omega who sheltered him. How very kind of you. I am sure the king will see that you are appropriately rewarded for your service. The dismissal in her tone was clear. Nessa was a servant who had performed a task and would now be compensated and sent on her way. Not a threat. Not someone of consequence. Just a temporary inconvenience to be dealt with politely and then forgotten. Demon stepped forward, and his arm wrapped around Nessa's waist, pulling her. Against his side with a possessiveness that could not be misunderstood. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Lady Seraphina, Demon said, and his voice was hard, formal, utterly lacking the warmth he had shown Nessa over the past 3 days. Allow me to introduce Nessa Thornwood. She is not here as a servant to be rewarded. She is here as my mate and the future Luna Queen of this realm. You will accord her the respect that position demands. The silence that followed was absolute. Nessa felt every eye in the courtyard lock onto her, felt the weight of shock and disbelief, and in some cases outright hostility crashing over her like a wave. Seraphina's beautiful face went utterly still, her eyes flashing with something dark and dangerous before she schooled her expression back into a mask of polite surprise. Your mate, she repeated, and her voice was light, almost amused. Forgive me, Your Majesty, but I must have misheard. Surely you mean that she will be honored as the one who saved your son. Not that you intend to actually bind yourself to an Omega with no pack, no lineage, no wolf. The insult was delivered with surgical precision, designed to humiliate while maintaining plausible deniability. Demon's arm tightened around Nessa's waist, and she felt a growl rumble through his chest. You heard me correctly. Nessa carries Luna bloodline, and she is my true mate. The bond has been recognized, and it will be completed when she is ready. Anyone who questions this, anyone who shows her anything less than absolute respect, will answer to me personally. The threat hung in the air, and Nessa saw several wolves take involuntary steps back. But Seraphina merely smiled, a cold expression that did not reach her eyes. Of course, Your Majesty. If you say she is Luna, then she must be. Though I am certain the Council will want to verify such an extraordinary claim. For the good of the realm, you understand. We cannot have just anyone claiming royal blood without proof. The challenge was clear. Seraphina was not going to accept this quietly. She was going to fight, and she was going to use every weapon at her disposal to discredit Nessa and maintain her own position. Nessa felt her stomach twist with dread, but before she could speak, Kieran stepped forward. The small prince had been quiet since their arrival, but now his young voice rang out clear and strong. She is Mama, he said, his golden eyes blazing with a fierceness that belied his age. She saved me when no one else could find me. She held me when I had nightmares. She made me feel safe when I thought I would never feel safe again. And if anyone tries to hurt her, they will have to go through me first. The declaration from a child should have been easy to dismiss. But there was something in Kieran's stance, in the way power seemed to shimmer around his small frame, that made even Seraphina pause. How brave, she said after. A moment, her tone patronizing. It is wonderful that you have bonded with your rescuer, little prince. But matters of state require more than childish affection. Demon's growl deepened into something that made the air vibrate with threat. That is enough, Seraphina. You have made your position clear. Now stand aside or remove yourself from my presence. I will not have Nessa's first moments in her new home poisoned by your venom. For a moment, Nessa thought Seraphina might actually challenge him further. But the woman was too clever for that. She inclined her head in a gesture that managed to be respectful and mocking at the same time. As you wish, Your Majesty. I look forward to the council meeting where we can all properly welcome our new Luna. She swept away, her entourage following like ducklings, and Nessa finally allowed herself to breathe. That went well, Lyra muttered from somewhere behind them, and despite everything, Nessa felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in her throat. Demon looked down at her, Concern etched into every line of his face. "I am sorry. I had hoped to introduce you more gently, to give you time to settle before dealing with the court politics. But Serafina has spies everywhere, and she clearly knew we were arriving today." Nessa shook her head, forcing herself to stand straighter, to project a confidence she did not feel. "It does not matter. She was always going to be an enemy. At least now I know what I am facing." Demon's expression shifted into something that looked almost like pride. "You are already thinking like a Luna. Good. You will need that strength in the days to come." He guided her into the palace, through corridors that seemed to stretch on forever, past rooms filled with more luxury than Nessa had ever imagined. Finally, they reached a suite of chambers that made her cabin look like a closet. "These are the Luna's quarters," Demon explained, and there was something tentative in his voice. "They have been empty since Miriam died. If you would prefer something smaller, more modest, I can arrange it." Nessa walked through the room slowly, taking in the massive bed draped in silk, the sitting area with cushions that looked softer than clouds, the bathing room with a tub large enough to swim in. It was beautiful and terrifying, and so far removed from anything she had ever known that she wanted to cry. "It is perfect," she lied, because she could see how much it mattered to Demon that she accept this, that she take her place as his mate. "Thank you." Demon's relief was palpable. He crossed to her, his hands framing her face with that now familiar gentleness. "Tomorrow we begin your training. You will work with the best teachers in the kingdom to awaken your wolf, to learn to control the power of your bloodline. It will be hard, Nessa. There will be days when you want to give up, but I will be with you every step of the way." Nessa nodded, leaning into his touch, drawing strength from his certainty. "I am ready. Or at least, I will try to be ready." Demon smiled, and then he did what she had been hoping he might do since that night in her tent. He leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that started gentle and quickly deepened into something that made her head spin and her knees weak. His mouth moved against hers with a hunger that was barely restrained, his hands sliding into her hair and tilting her head back to give him better access. Nessa gasped against his lips, and he took advantage of her parted mouth to deepen the kiss further, his tongue sweeping against hers in a way that sent liquid heat pooling in her belly. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard, and Nessa had to grip his arms to keep herself upright. "That," Demon said, his voice rough and his eyes blazing with desire, "is just a taste of what awaits us when the bond is complete. When you have awakened your wolf and accepted me fully as your mate, I want you, Nessa. More than I have ever wanted anything. But I will wait until you are ready. Until you come to me freely and without fear." Nessa stared up at him, her lips still tingling from the kiss, her body humming with sensations she had never experienced before, and felt her wolf rise up inside her with a fierceness that shocked her. "Want him?" the silver presence demanded. "Claim him. Make him ours. Soon," Nessa whispered, the promise falling from her lips before she could question it. "Help me awaken my wolf. Teach me to be strong, and soon I will claim you as mine, just as you have claimed me as yours." Demon's smile was devastating, full of heat and promise and something that looked dangerously close to love. "That is all I needed to hear, my Luna. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, your transformation begins." The next weeks passed in a blur of training and politics, and moments of breathless connection with Demon that left Nessa reeling. Every morning, she worked with a stern older wolf named Helena, who pushed her body to its limits, teaching her to sense the wolf inside her, to coax it toward wakefulness. Every afternoon, she studied pack law and politics with advisors who looked at her with varying degrees of skepticism and hope. And every evening, she spent time with Demon and Kieran, building the foundation of the family they were becoming. The progress was slow but undeniable. Nessa could feel her wolf growing stronger, could sense the moment when she would finally be able to shift. Drawing closer. Her body was changing too, growing leaner and more muscular from the training, her senses sharpening until she could pick out individual scents in a crowded room, could hear conversations happening 3 corridors away. But the court was another matter entirely. Serafina had rallied her supporters, wolves who saw Nessa as an upstart Omega, trying to steal what belonged to noble bloodlines. They questioned her lineage at every opportunity, demanded proof of her Luna heritage, spread rumors that she had seduced the king with dark magic or trickery. The whispers followed Nessa everywhere, wearing down her confidence despite Demon's constant reassurances. It all came to a head during a council meeting 6 weeks after her arrival. Nessa had been sitting quietly beside Demon, trying to follow the complex political discussions, when Serafina rose to her feet. "Your Majesty, members of the council, I think it is time we address the elephant in the room. We have all been patient, have all waited for proof of Nessa Thornwood's supposed Luna bloodline. But she has yet to shift, has yet to demonstrate any of the powers that should accompany such a legacy. How long must we pretend that she is anything more than a clever Omega who caught the king's eye?" The words were delivered with surgical precision, designed to wound while maintaining a facade of concern for the kingdom. Nessa felt her face flush with humiliation as murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled wolves. Demon started to rise, fury written across his face, but Nessa placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. "Lady Serafina raises a valid concern," Nessa said, proud that her voice remained steady even as her heart hammered in her chest. "I have not yet shifted. I have not demonstrated the powers you all expect. But I would remind the council that Luna bloodline awakens in its own time, that forcing it before I am ready could be dangerous for both me and the bond I share with your king." She stood, meeting Serafina's cold gaze directly. "However, if the council requires proof of my heritage, I am willing to undergo whatever tests you deem necessary. I have nothing to hide and nothing to prove, except that I am exactly who the king says I am." The challenge hung in the air, and Nessa saw surprise flicker across several faces. They had expected her to cower or defer to Demon's protection. Instead, she was calling their bluff, offering to face whatever trial they could. "Devise." Serafina's smile sharpened into something predatory. "How brave. Then I propose a simple test. The ancient Luna texts speak of a sacred pool in the heart of the royal forest, a place where true Lunas can commune with the spirits of their ancestors. If Nessa truly carries the bloodline, the pool will recognize her. If not, well, then we will have our answer." Nessa felt ice spread through her veins. She had heard of this pool during her studies, had read accounts of Lunas who had visited it and emerged transformed. But she had also read accounts of wolves who had tried to fake Luna heritage and had been driven mad by the pool's rejection. Demon's hand found hers under the table, squeezing hard enough to hurt. Through their growing bond, she could feel his concern, his desire to refuse this test and protect her from the risk. But Nessa also knew that if she backed down now, she would never gain the court's respect. She would always be the Omega who hid behind the king's protection, never the Luna who stood on her own strength. "I accept," Nessa said, before Demon could speak. "When shall we conduct this test?" Serafina's smile widened. "Tomorrow at dawn, in front of the full court, so there can be no question of the results." The meeting adjourned shortly after, and Demon pulled Nessa into a private chamber, his expression thunderous. "You should have let me refuse. That pool is dangerous, Nessa. Even true Lunas have been hurt by it if they were not properly prepared." Nessa turned to face him, drawing on every ounce of courage she possessed. "I know. But I also know that I will never be accepted here unless I prove myself. Not to you, not to Kieran, but to the wolves who will serve under me if I truly become Luna Queen. I have to do this, Demon. I have to know for myself if what you believe about me is real. Demon pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. You are the bravest person I have ever met, and the most stubborn. If you are determined to do this, then I will be there with you, every step of the way. That night, Nessa could not sleep. She stood at the window of her chambers, looking out over the palace grounds, and tried to quiet the fear that clawed at her chest. What if the pool rejected her? What if Demon was wrong about her bloodline? What if she was exactly what everyone had always said she was? A defective Omega with delusions of grandeur. A soft knock at her door broke through her. Spiraling thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting Demon or maybe Lyra checking on her before the trial. Instead, Kieran slipped through the door, his small face serious. "Mama could not sleep?" he asked, padding across the room to stand beside her at the window. Nessa pulled him against her side, grateful for his solid warmth. "No, Lucky. Too many thoughts in my head." Kieran was quiet for a moment, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. "The pool will know Mama is special. Mama saved me when no one else could. Mama is strong even when she does not feel strong. The spirits will see that." His childlike faith made Nessa's throat tight with emotion. "What if they do not? What if your father is wrong about me?" Kieran looked up at her with an intensity that made him seem far older than his years. "Then Papa is not wrong about Mama. Papa knows things. Papa knew Mama was special the first time he saw her. And I know too. Mama has a wolf. I can feel her when Mama holds me. She is just sleeping, waiting for the right time to wake up." Nessa knelt down so she was eye level with him, cupping his small face in her hands. "You have so much faith in me, Lucky. I hope I can live up to it." Kieran's smile was bright and certain. "Mama already does. Every single day." He kissed her cheek and slipped away, leaving Nessa alone with her thoughts and a warmth in her chest that pushed back against the fear. When dawn came, it felt both too soon and like she had been waiting forever. Nessa, dressed in the simple white gown that tradition demanded for Luna trials, her hair left loose down her back. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. 6 weeks of training had changed her, had carved away the softness of her old life and revealed something sharper underneath. But the eyes were still the same, still uncertain, still afraid. Demon was waiting for her outside her chambers, and the look on his face when he saw her made her breath catch. "You are beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm, "and you are going to be magnificent today. I believe in you, Nessa, even if you do not believe in yourself yet." They walked through the palace together, and Nessa felt the weight of countless stairs following them. The entire court had gathered in the royal forest, creating a pathway to the sacred pool that glowed with an otherworldly light, even in the dawn shadows. Serafina stood at the edge of the pool, her expression triumphant, clearly. Confident that Nessa would fail, and her own path to becoming queen would be secured. Nessa approached the pool slowly, feeling the power emanating from it like waves of heat. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the morning sky, but she could sense something ancient stirring beneath the surface, something that would either accept her or destroy her. "The trial is simple," Serafina announced, her voice carrying across the gathered wolves. "Nessa Thornwood will enter the sacred pool and call. To the Luna spirits, if she carries true Luna bloodline, they will answer. If not, the pool will reject her, and we will have our proof that she is merely an Omega with pretensions above her station." Nessa did not look at Serafina. She kept her eyes on the pool, on the rippling surface that seemed to beckon and threaten in equal measure. She felt Demon's hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding her, reminding her that she was not alone. "I love you," he whispered, low enough that only she could hear. "No matter what happens in that pool, no matter what the spirits say, I love you, and that will not change." The words should have been a comfort, but instead, they made Nessa's eyes burn with tears. Because if she failed, she would have to watch Demon try to rule without his true mate, would have to see him forced into a political marriage with someone like Serafina. She could not let that happen. Nessa stepped forward, her bare feet touching the edge of the pool, and felt power surge through her like lightning. The water was not cold as she expected. It was warm, almost alive, seeming to reach for her as she waded deeper. When the water reached her waist, she stopped and closed her eyes, reaching inward for the silver presence she had come to know over the past weeks. "Wake up," she pleaded with her wolf. "Please wake up. I need you. We need you." For a long moment, there was nothing. Just silence, and the weight of hundreds of watching eyes and the certainty that she was about to fail in the most public way possible. Then, deep inside her chest, something stirred. That silver presence, that patient, ancient thing, suddenly blazed to life with an intensity that stole her breath. And with it came a flood of memories that were not hers. Women with silver eyes and voices that could command pack bonds. Lunas who had stood beside Alpha Kings and shaped the destiny of nations. A bloodline that stretched back centuries, passed down through her mother and her mother's mother, and beyond. They had been hidden, suppressed, their wolves forced into dormancy to protect them from those who would kill them for their power. But they had never been gone, never been broken. Just waiting for the right moment to rise again. Nessa opened her eyes, and she knew without looking that they were glowing silver. She could feel her wolf surging toward the surface, could feel her body beginning to change in ways it never had before. The pool around her began to churn, the water rising in spirals that glowed with ethereal light. And from the depths came voices, ancient and powerful and utterly certain. "Daughter of Luna, blood of our blood, you have been called and you have answered. Rise, child. Take your place. Claim your power. Show them all who you truly are." The pain of the shift was unlike anything Nessa had imagined. Her bones cracked and reformed, her muscles tore and regrew, her skin rippled with the emergence of fur that gleamed like moonlight. She tried to scream, but what came out was a howl, long and haunting, and filled with the voices of every Luna who had come before her. When it was done, when the pain finally receded, Nessa stood on 4 legs in the center of the sacred pool and felt power coursing through her veins like liquid starlight. She was massive, larger than any she-wolf she had ever seen, with fur that seemed to shift between silver and white, depending on the light. And her eyes, she knew without seeing them, burned with the same silver fire that had marked the greatest Lunas in history. The silence from the gathered court was absolute. Then Demon threw back his head and howled, a sound of pure triumph and joy that was quickly taken up by his warriors. Kieran shifted and added his young voice to the chorus, and soon the entire forest rang with the sound of wolves celebrating their Luna. Nessa stepped out of the pool, water streaming from her fur, and felt a sense of rightness settle into her bones. This was who she was meant to be. This was the destiny she had been running from her entire life without even knowing it. She shifted back to her human form with an ease that shocked her, standing naked and unashamed in front of the entire court, because she finally understood that she had nothing to be ashamed of. Demon was there in an instant, wrapping her in his cloak, his eyes blazing with pride and desire and love so fierce it made her knees weak. "My Luna," he said, and his voice cracked with emotion. "My magnificent, beautiful, perfect Luna." Nessa looked past him to where Serafina stood, the woman's face pale with shock and rage. "You wanted proof," Nessa said, and her voice carried a resonance it had never had before, a power that made several wolves drop their eyes in instinctive submission. "You have it now. I am Luna. I am the king's mate. And I am done apologizing for existing. If this story touched your heart, Share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments. Did you see this ending coming? The weeks that followed the pool trial were transformative in ways Nessa could never have anticipated. With her wolf finally awakened, the bond between her and Demon strengthened daily. She could feel his emotions now, could sense his presence even when they were separated by the vast palace. And he could feel hers, which meant there was no hiding her fears or doubts, or the overwhelming love that grew with each passing day. The court's attitude shifted. Dramatically. Wolves who had sneered at her now bowed their heads in respect. Those who had whispered about her being an upstart Omega now sought her favor, eager to align themselves with the newly awakened Luna. Only Serafina and her closest supporters remained openly hostile, but even they were forced to show public deference. Nessa threw herself into learning her new role with the same determination that had kept her alive through years of loneliness. She studied pack law and diplomacy, learned to navigate the complex web of alliances and enmities that defined court politics, and worked with Helena to master the powers that came with her Luna bloodline. She discovered she could strengthen pack bonds with a touch, could sense deception through the connection she shared with wolves who had sworn loyalty to Demon, could project calm or courage or determination through the invisible threads that linked her to the kingdom. But it was the private moments with Demon that truly transformed her. He courted her with a patience and tenderness that made her fall more deeply in love each day. Moonlit walks through the palace gardens, where he told her stories of his childhood and the weight of responsibility he had carried since becoming king so young. Quiet dinners in his private chambers where they talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's hearts as well as they knew each other's bodies. Training sessions where they sparred both in human and wolf form, the physical exertion giving way to heated kisses and touches that left them both trembling with need. But Demon never pushed for more, never demanded the final consummation of their bond, even though Nessa could feel how much he wanted it, how much his wolf demanded he claim her fully. He was waiting for her to be ready, to come to him without fear or reservation. And as the full moon approached, Nessa realized she was ready. More than ready. She wanted Demon with an intensity that shocked her. Wanted to complete the bond that had been building between them since that first moment in her cabin. She wanted to stand beside him, not just as his mate, but as his equal, his partner in every way that mattered. The full moon celebration was the largest gathering Nessa had attended since arriving at the palace. Hundreds of wolves from across the kingdom had come to witness the Luna Queen's first public ceremony, to see the woman who had awakened the ancient bloodline after decades of believing it extinct. Nessa wore a gown of silver that seemed to capture the moonlight, her hair adorned with flowers that Kieran had carefully woven in that afternoon. She felt beautiful and powerful and terrified in equal measure. The ceremony itself was a blur of ritual and tradition. She stood beside Demon as he addressed his people, speaking of unity and strength and the dawn of a new era. She accepted the formal oaths of loyalty from the pack leaders, feeling the bonds snap into place one by one, until she could sense the vast network of wolves connected to her and Demon. And when it came time for the final ritual, the one where she would publicly accept Demon as her mate and complete the bond that would tie them together for the rest of their lives, Nessa did not hesitate. She took Demon's hand, looked into his eyes that burned like molten gold in the moonlight, and spoke the words that would change everything. I, Nessa Thornwood, Luna Queen of the Blackthorn Pack, accept you, Demon Blackthorn, as my mate, my partner, my equal in all things. I bind my life to yours, my wolf to yours, my heart to yours, from this moment until our last breath. The bond snapped into place, with a force that drove them both to their knees, a connection so deep and fundamental that Nessa could not tell where she ended and Demon began. She felt his love for her, his pride, his desperate need, and his absolute certainty that she was the other half of his soul. And she felt her own emotions reflected back through the bond, magnified and transformed into something that transcended anything she had thought possible. When they rose, when Demon pulled her into his arms and kissed her in front of the entire gathered court, the cheers that erupted were deafening. But Nessa barely heard them. All she could focus on was the man holding her, the bond humming between them like a living thing, and the absolute rightness of this moment. Later, when the celebrations had wound down and the palace had finally quieted, Demon led Nessa to his private chambers. The Luna's quarters had been beautiful, but she had rarely used them, preferring to spend her nights in the rooms adjacent to Demon's, as close as propriety allowed. Now there would be no more separation. No more pretending that they were anything other than what they were. Mates. Partners. Two halves of a whole finally reunited. Demon closed the door behind them and leaned against it, his eyes tracking her every movement as Nessa walked deeper into the room. "Are you certain about this?" he asked, and despite the desire burning in his gaze, there was genuine concern in his voice. "We have all the time in the world, Nessa. If you need more time, if you are not ready, I will wait as long as you need." Nessa turned to face him, and she felt her wolf rise up inside her, certain and demanding and utterly unafraid. "I am certain. I have been certain for weeks now, but I needed to complete the public bond first, needed to claim you in front of the entire kingdom, so that no one could ever question that you are mine, and I am yours." She began unlacing her gown, her fingers steady even though her heart was racing. "I want you, Demon. I want to complete this bond in every way possible. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep in your arms every night. I want to build a life with you and Kieran. I want everything you have been offering me since that first day in my cabin when you told me I was more than I knew." The gown slipped from her shoulders and pooled at her feet, leaving her standing before him in nothing but moonlight and the silver glow of her Luna power. Demon's control, the iron restraint he had maintained for weeks, shattered. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was hungry and desperate, and full of weeks of pent-up longing. Nessa kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands sliding into his hair, and tugging him closer, wanting to eliminate every bit of space between them. They made their way to the bed in a tangle of limbs and desperate touches, clothes disappearing between heated kisses and whispered words of love and need. When Demon finally laid her down on the silk sheets and covered her body with his own, Nessa felt complete in a way she had never imagined possible. This was what it meant to be mated. This overwhelming sense of rightness, of two souls recognizing each other and choosing to intertwine. They moved together with an urgency born of weeks of restraint, their wolves rising to the surface and demanding the final claiming. When Demon's teeth found the junction of her neck and shoulder, marking her as his for all to see, Nessa cried out with pleasure and pain and triumph. And when she marked him in return, feeling his blood on her tongue, and his wolf submitting to hers in a way that spoke of perfect equality, the bond between them blazed so bright it felt like the sun had risen inside her chest. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, hearts racing and bodies slick with sweat, and Nessa felt tears slide down her cheeks. "What is wrong?" Demon asked immediately, his hand coming up to cup her face with devastating gentleness. "Did I hurt you? Was it too much?" Nessa shook her head, laughing through her tears. "No, nothing is wrong. Everything is so perfectly right that I cannot quite believe it is real. 6 months ago, I was alone in a cabin, convinced I would live my entire life as a worthless omega that no one wanted. And now I am here, with you, mated to the most powerful alpha king in centuries, with a son who calls me mama and a wolf who makes me feel invincible. It is too much happiness. I keep waiting for it to be taken away." Demon pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her like a shield against the entire world. "Nothing is taking you away from me. Not politics, not enemies, not fate itself. You are mine, Nessa. My mate. My Luna, my everything. And I will spend the rest of our very long lives proving that you deserve every bit of this happiness and more." Nessa buried her face against his chest, breathing in his scent and feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her ear, and let herself believe. Let herself trust that this was real and lasting, and hers to keep. The months that followed were not without challenges. Serafina made one final attempt to undermine Nessa's position, spreading rumors about the legitimacy of her Luna bloodline and attempting to turn the council against her. But Nessa had learned to navigate court politics with the same determination she brought to everything else. She faced down the accusations with evidence and grace, demonstrating her Luna powers in ways that could not be denied. And when Serafina went too far, actually attempting to poison Nessa during a formal dinner, Demon's response was swift and absolute. The woman was stripped of her titles and lands and exiled from the kingdom, her supporters scattering like leaves in the wind. With that final threat eliminated, Nessa truly settled into her role as Luna Queen. She implemented reforms that had been needed for years, creating programs to help Omegas and orphans, establishing schools to train young wolves in skills beyond combat, opening diplomatic channels with neighboring kingdoms that had been closed for decades. Demon ruled with strength, but Nessa ruled with compassion, and together they created a balance that made their kingdom flourish in ways it had not in generations. Kieran thrived under their care, growing into a confident young prince who never forgot the Omega who had saved him when he was at his lowest. He called Nessa Mama without hesitation, and she loved him as fiercely as if she had given birth to him herself. And when, 2 years after the mating ceremony, Nessa discovered she was pregnant with Demon's child, the joy that swept through the kingdom was matched only by the joy in her own heart. She gave birth to a daughter with silver eyes and Demon's dark hair, a little girl who shifted for the first time at only 6 months old, and who carried a Luna bloodline even stronger than Nessa's own. They named her Miriam, after Kieran's birth mother, and watched her grow alongside the brother who adored her. On the night of Miriam's first birthday, Nessa stood on the balcony of the royal chambers and looked out over the kingdom she had helped to shape. Demon came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist and his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice warm with contentment. Nessa leaned back against him, marveling at how natural this felt, how completely she had transformed from the frightened Omega hiding in a cabin to the confident Luna Queen who stood here now. "I was thinking about destiny," she said quietly. "How I spent so many years believing I did not have one, that I was a mistake of nature, with no purpose or value, and how wrong I was. Everything I went through, every moment of loneliness and rejection, it was all leading me to that forest where I would find Kieran, where I would save him, and in doing so, save myself." Demon tightened his arms around her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You saved all of us, Nessa. Me, Kieran, this entire kingdom. You brought hope back to a world that had forgotten what it looked like." Nessa turned in his arms, looking up at the man she loved. "More than life itself. We saved each other. That is what mates do, what partners do. We lift each other up and make each other stronger." She kissed him softly, feeling their bond hum with contentment and love and the certainty of forever. "I love you, Demon Blackthorn. From that first moment you walked through my door and told me I was more than I knew. I have loved you." Demon's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face into something that took her breath away even after years. "Together. And I love you, Nessa Blackthorn, Luna Queen, mother of my children, and the other half of my soul. From that first moment, I scented our bond to this moment, and every moment for the rest of our lives." They stood there together, wrapped in each other's arms, and the knowledge that they had found what so many searched for and never discovered. True love, perfect partnership, a bond that would last through every storm and emerge stronger on the other side. and in the palace behind them. Their children slept safely, protected by the love of two souls who had been forged in adversity and had chosen each other despite every obstacle. The kingdom they would inherit would be one built on strength and compassion, power and kindness, the perfect blend of everything Demon and Nessa had learned to be. It was not the destiny Nessa had imagined for herself. It was so much more. And she would spend every day of the rest of her life grateful for the moment she had chosen to save a wounded cub from hunter's traps and had unknowingly set in motion the events that would transform her from nothing into everything she was meant to be.